We don't have to fill out one of these when we're out there, right? What?
All breath out in a second.
Yeah.
All rise. You may be seated. Okay. Now, this is the schedule of the trial from beginning to end. We'll begin with the opening remarks from the judge, which is me, the Honorable Michael J. Kula. We'll then move on to the opening statement from the prosecution, the opening statement from the defense, the calling of witnesses from the prosecution, the calling of witnesses from the defense. Finally, the closing statement by the prosecution and the closing statement by the defense. While we are doing this, okay, and let me explain to you what your assignment is again, especially for those of you who weren't here yesterday. Everybody should have a sheet that looks like this, okay? You should get that out in front of you because I'm going to go over this again right now. Curious?
Yeah, I need one of these.
I already asked who wasn't here yesterday. I'll told both of you to have a report. Please approach the bench. Please approach the bench. You may be. Okay. So it is going to be the job of everybody in this room involved to determine what our verdict is. Okay, and in doing that, you will be evaluating each testimony and scoring it. Okay? For each segment, or for each testimony, you will have 6 points to allocate between the two sides. You will be asked to take notes of evidence for and against each side, as well as the miscellaneous factors, such as the rest of the stuff that's mentioned there. Before allocating your points, you'll then be graded individually on how well you used evidence to support your score. So, turn to your packet. You have a packet full of charts. So, in the first gray box, where it says testimony number, you're going to write 1, because that's where you're going to evaluate the first testimony. Okay. The witnesses are. This is the opening statement. So the opening statements are the first testimony. Write that next to where it says witnesses. And then, where it says attorneys, who are going to be the attorneys giving the opening statement? Keshav and Alex, S. So those are going to be the attorneys responsible for this testimony. Now, everybody's going to be listening to the testimony and writing down evidence that would support the prosecution and that would support the defense. All right? What are you looking for? Key facts mentioned, motives and alibis mentioned, credibility of the witness. This is all on the front sheet that you have. Emotional appeals, witnesses and attorneys being caught too emotional, witnesses caught in a contradiction, attorney or witness stumped, rhetorical questioning, nonverbals or body language, repetition, and the speech skills of the attorney or the witness. You're going to take all that into consideration, and you're going to distribute 6 points between the two sides. You may score them 4 and score them 2. You may score them 4 and then score them 2, or 5 and 1, or 6 and 0, or 3 and 3. But the score has to add up to 6. Add up to 6. You cannot score them a 6 and them a 4. For example, if you do, you'll screw everything up. Make sure you understand that that's very important. Okay? When all is said and done, will look at your evaluation of the particular testimony, and I will look at, well, how well did you use, everything that we've learned so far this semester as far as what are good debating skills, what are good persuasive skills, in justifying the score that you gave, and then I will score you individually out of 10. So your individual score on these packets will depend on how many testimonies there are. Let's say there are 20 testimonies, your individual score will be out of 200. And that will be your exam grade. Does that make sense? Okay. So, for purposes of clarity, before we get there, you guys will be able to call witnesses first. Who is going to be the first witness that you intend to call up?
Officer Shavala.
Officer Shavala. Okay, so Tim Shavala, you guys can go down to testimony 2, where it says testimony number 2. I know what question you're going to ask. I will address it in a second. The witness will be Tim Shavala. The attorneys will be, you'll have to wait to see what attorneys come up to do the questioning. Okay? And then you will take note of evidence that support the prosecution, evidence that support the defense. There will be an examination, then there will be a cross-examination. During the examination, something may surface that supports the defense. During the cross-examination, something may surface that supports the prosecution. You'll just have to score them at the end. At the end of the trial, I will give you a list of every testimony that has happened and who has been testified so that you will know how many of these blocks you will have had to have filled out. Okay? In addition, say for example, Alex is giving her opening statement. She's not there sitting down being able to write and score the opening statement. Okay? At this point, from this point forward, this trial will be on video from beginning to end. Okay? The video will be, as soon as the trial is complete, the video will go up on YouTube. These will not be collected from you until a couple weeks after the trial is over. That will give you time to, if you were a participant so that you couldn't write, to go back and watch and write. If you missed a day and didn't see it, to go back and view all the testimonies that you missed, or, if you're really diligent, to go back and watch the entire thing and add to everything to ensure that you get a perfect exam grade. Are there any questions as far as how that goes? This is the people of the state of Ohio versus Courtney A. Golston and Anna I. Ray. The complaint has been that that Ms. Golston poisoned her husband by using potassium cyanide in a beverage of his. Her husband Gino will be referred to as the victim. He is now dead. And in a second, in their opening statements, the prosecution and the defense will come up and will address the court as far as what charges they intend to put forth for Ms. Golston and Ms. Reyes. Yes.
Before we start this, I have no idea where my packet went.
You mean your?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I feel like this is it, but I honestly disappeared. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this time, prosecution, I need you to approach the bench and begin with your opening statement. Yes, sir. Yes, you may. I am going to be on my phone tracking the testimonies as they happen, so I'll be able to give you a list of the testimonies from beginning to end.
All right. This trial is one that we shouldn't be having right now. Miss is Courtney Golston has pleaded guilty to murdering her husband, whether that be justifiable homicide in self-defense or first-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter was murder. See, my opponents, the defendants, are going to try to claim that Mrs. Golston murdered her husband because she was being abused and she was doing this in self-defense. However, in the court of law, self-defense can only be done out of peril and be at the moment and not premeditated. Unfortunately, the two defendants premeditated this murder. They planned it for 2 weeks, plus even maybe more weeks than that. 2 weeks from what we know so far. what I intend to do in this trial is to prove that not only was abuse not a factor, but they were trying to commit this heinous crime out of a selfish purpose. The evidence will point to that, the witnesses will point to that, and eventually the defendants will point to that. I intend to charge them with voluntary manslaughter and with Miss Anna Reyes to be accomplice to the crime.
Yes, you may be seated. The defense, your opening statement, please.
I would like to start out by defining what exactly justifiable homicide is. It's killing without an evil or criminal intent, basically self-defense. Our victim was being abused, and I don't know where my opponent is getting the number 2 weeks, but that is obviously not a factor because it was a heat-of-the-moment decision. But when she was abused, she needed an escape, and that's when he was beating her, she resorted to the last thing she could possibly do. And by this, she is innocent, and we will intend to prove that.
We will now begin with the prosecution's calling of witnesses. The way this will work is you will tell me which witness you would like to call to the stand. I will call the witness to the stand. Witnesses, once you approach the stand, you are under oath, and that means you must tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You do have the option of pleading the fifth, if that is a course you would like to take. Okay, you will sit here on the stand until you are released, until you are seated by me.
I would like to call to the stand Officer Tim Chervala.
Call Officer Tim Chervala to the stand.
I'd like to open. How are you doing this fine morning?
I'm fine. How about you?
That's good. Can you describe to me what the scene of the crime looked like?
Well, the first thing I noticed at the scene was that there was no sign of forced entry, which made me believe that, it's not like some guy pushed his way in there and attacked the husband of the defendant. When I got there, he was, I think, on the ground. He had, like, blood around his nose, that area. I hypothesized that was from the fall he made because there was a coffee table right in front of him. I believe that came from the coffee table when he fell on that. There was a small cup of liquid on the table. It looked like he drank out of that. And, yeah, that's what it looked like when I got there.
So, was it confirmed that the death was through the potassium cyanide?
Yes, it was.
Alright, so would it be fair to suggest that the scene of the crime looked like a rather calm place, aside from the dead body, obviously?
Yeah.
There were no other signs of any violent behavior going on at that moment of the crime. Interesting. So, if this was a heat of the moment thing, why isn't there any evidence, the description that Officer Chervala is giving suggests that there was no abuse going on, because generally abuse is a violent thing, so it wouldn't look like any normal household. Now, when you interrogated Mrs. Goldston, were there any visible signs of abuse? Were there any bruises, lacerations, any cuts or wounds?
Not at all.
Not at all. So, if the defendants were being abused, and simply how long after Miss Goldston turned herself in or after the body was found, did you interrogate her?
I think it was a couple of days after.
Couple days. So couple days. You think that in a couple days, bruises would remain?
Yeah, they would.
They would? Alright, so interesting. 2 days after the crime was committed, 2 days after Mrs. Goldston was supposedly abused, there were no signs. Very, very interesting. That is all I have.
Defense, would you like to cross-examine?
Yes.
You're not ready.
ever spoken to Courtney in the time of the interview?
Yes, there was only one time.
Yes? Did you do a full body search to ensure that there were no bruises or cuts on Courtney's body?
No, we did not. It was only visible from the arms and legs and the upper part of her head area.
Then how can you physically say that there was no cuts, no bruises on her body whatsoever?
I said no visible.
No visible? Then I don't understand how that proves my opponent's point, saying that there was no cuts or bruises, because he does not have the full evidence to say that fact.
No further questions?
Yes.
You may be seated. Attorneys, once you're through with your testimony, just declare no further questions, and I will release the witness. Prosecution, would you like to call your next witness to the stand?
I'd like to call Brian Jamal Jones III.
Second.
Call Brian Jamal Jones II to the stand. This will be testimony number 3. For those of you in your packets, this will be testimony number 3.
Should we grade ourselves?
How you doing this fine? I'm fine, cuz. How you doing, sir? That's what's up, cuz.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. Can you please describe to me your friendship with the victim?
Yeah, man, that's my homie, cuz. We go way back, man. Like this, cuz. Like this. You know what I'm saying? We grew up in the same hood, you know what I'm saying? We knew each other in grade school, high school, talked out our entire lives. I lived around the corner from him. Good homie.
Now, during your friendship, would you say that the victim displayed violent behavior?
Man, never got a detention. Never got into a fight. He was a good dude.
Did he seem like someone who would be abusive? Now, you've been friends with the victim for a while now. You were up until his unfortunate death. Did he ever describe to you his relationship with Mrs. Golson?
Yes.
Now, can you elaborate on that?
A couple weeks ago, before he passed, he told me how, things were kind of looking kind of shaky between him and her. He said how he kind of wanted her to get a job, and he felt like he was the only one trying in the relationship.
Did he seem angry, or did he just seem disappointed?
He didn't seem angry. He seemed hurt.
He seemed hurt. Now, can you tell me, from your opinion, obviously, do you think that the victim loved Mrs. Golson?
Yes.
He loved her. And do you think that he would abuse her? No. The best friend, the person who knew him most intimately, knew the victim most intimately, says that he was not an abusive person. He wouldn't do such a heinous thing. So why should we believe simply what the defendant is saying? It's taking the word of hers over someone who's dead, who was a victim of a senseless crime. Now, at the scene of the crime, did you see the actual glass that used poison,
Yes, sir.
And was it on the floor, was it on the ground?
It was on the ground.
It was on the ground. So, and from your opinion, do you think that Gino was standing, or do you think he was sitting down?
Sitting.
You think he was sitting down? And can you tell me what suggests that?
It was like a chair knocked over.
Now, I don't know how familiar the jury is with abuse, but generally it's not done while you're sitting down. So, I don't think that's really valid. Now, so you said that Gino thought, or the victim rather, thought he was the only one trying in the relationship. Can you tell me why that is? If he disclosed any information about that?
He said that she was really moody. She get angry really fast at him. He said that things just weren't the way they used to be.
Now, did the victim ever tell you of any occurrence that a Courtney would instigate some anger or argument?
Yeah, he said he would try to avoid going back and forth with her, but they would, small things would turn into big things.
So would it be fair to say that Courtney had a short fuse?
Yes.
So Mrs. Goldston had a short fuse. Now would you be willing to say that that could instigate into violence from her side? Yes. Okay, again, someone who is close to the family is saying that Courtney, Mrs. Goldston, had a short fuse. So any evidence that there was abuse that was going on could very well be instigated by Mrs. Goldston, and then, in self-defense, the victim could have been trying to combat this. That'll be all.
No further questions.
No further questions.
Would you like to cross-examine?
First of all, I would like to ask you, you did say you saw the glass on the table. Well, I would also like to say that our police officer over here said he saw the glass on the floor. This is contradicting itself, which makes his point invalid. How close were you with the victim?
Best friends, best man at his wedding.
Best friends. How far would you go to protect your homie?
Really good friend.
You'd protect him? So I'm sensing a little biased opinion in here. I don't think that.
Objection, Your Honor. He's simply stating facts on this relationship.
Objection sustained.
Have you ever personally met Courtney?
Yes.
That is false because Courtney has never met this person. She does not know him and he does not know her. And the only evidence that he has about her having a short fuse is what he is told from Gino. No further questions.
You may be seated.
I'd like to call Dr. Colin M. Hippler.
Call Dr. Hippler to the stand. This will be your fourth testimony. Testimony number 4.
So can you tell me your relationship with Mrs. Goldston?
Well, I've been her doctor for the last 2 years, and she's been having monthly checkups with me.
Please be seated. This is the prosecution bench. Please be seated in the witness bear in the
I'm sorry, we were interrupted. Can you repeat what you said?
I've been her doctor for 2 years, and I've had monthly checkups with her.
And can you tell me what went on with these checkups? Were they simply physicals, or did you do any mental checks? Did you prescribe her with anything? Or?
Well, she's had depression for the last 2 years, and she's told me that she never really takes a medication for it. And about 3 months ago, she told me that it wasn't really working for her, and that's when I diagnosed her with bipolar disorder. And she told me that she never really took her bipolar medication due to the fact that she said it gave her headaches.
Now, can you tell me what are the symptoms of bipolar disorder?
Well, when bipolar disorder is mixed with depression, it can lead to many startling things like you can seem to live like a normal person out in society and in a place of work, but at home you kind of have a more chance of breaking down and doing something more aggressive and rash decisions and kind of
Rash decisions, such as possibly poisoning your husband? Yes? That's interesting, considering the defendant's attorneys were trying to say that she didn't have a short fuse, when in fact she had bipolar disorder, which you would say would be a short fuse, would you not?
Yes.
Okay. So, and she wasn't taking her medication, so would it be fair to say that she was not of mental stability at the time of the crime?
Oh yes.
Oh, okay. So, do you think she had the ability to use good judgment
No, she would not.
Good judgment on whether her husband was behaving adequately. You think she would be able to show good judgment?
No, she would.
No, she would not be able to show good judgment. So how are we supposed to believe that her husband was being abusive when the only person at the time who said that the husband was being abusive was the defendant himself? If you want to talk about biased opinion, that's biased right there. Now, can you tell me when was the last time you saw Courtney?
About 3 weeks before.
3 weeks before. So, according to our whole timeline of events right here, this is before 3 weeks was before this whole plan to murder the husband happened. So, if there was abuse, there would have been abuse there. Now, did you see any? And 3 weeks before, what did you do? Was it a physical?
Yes, a physical.
Was it
and
physical? So you would have seen a lot of the body, would you not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell me, when you examined the body, were there any signs of abuse, any bruises or anything?
She didn't have anything except on her arm. She had a cut, and I had asked her where she had gotten this, and she claimed that she had cut herself one day, and it looked like it was pretty old, and so that's when I kind of knew that she was not taking her depressant medication, because she was cutting herself, and I asked her where she had gotten this, and she claimed that it was by herself.
So the only wounds that the defendant had were self-inflicted, not from the victim.
Correct.
So how can we blame the victim, who is not here to defend himself, for heinous acts of abuse, when the only abuse that was happening was due to the defendant herself? Now, and I'd just like to reiterate this point. Could you state that at least 2 weeks before the crime, Courtney was mentally unstable?
Correct.
Mentally unstable. That'll be all. No further questions.
Defense, would you like to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Would you prescribe some medication for that?
Not from you, doctor. Because I would like to ask you some questions. First of all, so you said that you diagnosed her with what symptoms from the bipolar? Like, what symptoms did you go off of from the bipolar?
Well, me and fellow doctors gave her an exam that kind of a test to see how the signs. She had basic signs of bipolar disorder, and so going through that, we went through and we tested her and found that she had bipolar disorder.
Isn't right before that you said that she said that her pills weren't working? What, as a doctor, what are you supposed to do about that if someone is saying that they are not working, and what are you supposed to do about that?
Well, I checked in why they weren't working, and it was because she wasn't even taking them. Was the reason why they weren't working.
Do you know for sure that she wasn't taking them?
Yes, because she told me.
Did she tell you why she wasn't taking her meds?
No, she did not.
Why didn't you find out for more information and ask her about that?
It seemed more like that she was willing to complain about her polyps than she really was trying to solve them.
As a doctor, are you supposed to be helping her solve those problems?
Yes.
So why are you up here as a doctor? Isn't there supposed to be some confidentiality or anything that has to do with protecting your client?
Well, the thing is, I've been frustrated how she does not listen to me, and I'm trying to help her, but I can't force her to take her pills or medication. That's just something I can't do.
Yes, but if she is not feeling helped, then shouldn't you try another way to help her as a doctor?
Yes, I have tried, but she does not listen. There's pretty much no other ways I can really try to help her.
What other ways have you tried to help her?
I've tried to give her the medication she needs. I've tried to give her comfort and try to find out what her problem is, why she's upset, and she's just not really even willing to try.
So you admit there is a problem. So if there's a problem, shouldn't you dig deeper? Maybe there is a problem as we've been looking at,
Well, I'm
such as abuse.
I would not think it was abuse. I think the only problem was that her mental state of her being unstable, to the fact that she was just like her story changed every time she saw me, and it was just pretty random. And you could obviously tell that she was not thinking and acting correctly.
Didn't Courtney tell you that she couldn't pay for further appointments, and that was why she was canceling?
Yes.
So what are you gonna? So you said that proves something, but is she couldn't pay for it, then she couldn't come and get her medicine. So why wasn't there any help for that?
Well, she doesn't take any medicine anymore either, and if she can't pay for me anymore, then that's kind of no longer my problem.
Okay, so as a doctor, he is saying that it's not his problem to help his client, to help his patient.
She's no longer my client, but if she cancels, she's technically no longer my client.
Okay, then this doctor is saying that this person that was his client, he's not attempting to help her anymore, and he's on the stand against her when he knows that there is a problem.
Objection, Your Honor. Are we trying to try the doctor here, or are we trying to try the defendant?
Objection overruled. I'll hear the rest of the statement.
Okay, thank you. Now I lost where I was because of this objection. But anyway, so the doctor here, as I was saying, he is not helping. He is on trial against, even though he knows that there is a problem, and he's admitted there's a problem. There must be a problem. There must be a reason why she's not taking her meds, and this problem is not being fixed. It's not being solved. And as a doctor, it is his job. It was his job to fix it, to send her to someone else, to help her if she needed higher help. And because he was not doing that, then I feel there is definitely a problem with the doctor's evidence and the doctor's proof, and I feel like it is not valid because of that. No further questions.
Maybe.
Am I allowed to ask more questions, or do I have to do another witness and then call?
You would have to be you would need to be released, and you would have to call him back to the stand. So you may be seated.
I'd like to recall Dr. Hippler.
Call Dr. Kepler to the stand.
Was that supposed to do?
Okay. So, testimony number 4 will be Colin Hippler. Testimony 5 will also be Colin Hippler.
I got a place to work now.
Alright, so can you tell me, did you ever suggest to Mrs. Golson that she should see a psychiatrist?
Yes, I did.
And of your knowledge, did she?
I'm not sure she never told me.
She never told you. Okay. So, from then on, do you consider it your responsibility of her mental state to be your responsibility?
No.
No. Why are we trying to crucify the doctor here? Because he was doing his job. He gave her other options. He gave Courtney other options. Is it his responsibility if she doesn't follow those options? Eventually, the buck stops with the defendant herself. If you're not willing to take responsibility for your own problems, how are you expecting to solve them? That is not Dr. Hippler's fault. That is her fault. Now, can you tell me, you said her mental state was unstable, right? So, could it be that she really didn't have that much background on her financial knowledge that she would just assume that she wasn't seeing the doctor?
Well, I know that she had not had a job in a long time.
Do you think it could have been a cop-out to just not see the doctor and just assume that she's mentally stable, that she doesn't need to?
Could be, yes.
Very interesting. So, we're trying to trust someone who was obviously mentally unstable. We have a cert. What are your credentials, sir?
Well, I have a degree in medicine and psychology. And,
No, psychology. So, you'd be willing to give a proper psychological analysis of the defendant, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, and you said that bipolarism causes rash decisions, right? Such as dropping the doctor who's trying to help you, correct?
Okay, rash decisions, it also has depression, it also causes anger, you won't think it's critically, you make rash decisions, and so when they're mixed together, that's pretty much the same person.
So, what does it matter that Dr. Hippler she isn't his client anymore? If he prescribed the medicine, if he referred her to a psychiatrist, now he doesn't know if he went to her, but I have a feeling, I have a hunch that she did go to a psychiatrist. Why is it his responsibility? I don't understand what the defendant's trying to, and this was the background of my objection. What are we getting out of badgering her, or badgering the doctor, when it has nothing to do with the crime? Did he poison Mrs. Golson? No. Did he try preventing her from poisoning Mrs. Golson? Yes. What is a doctor supposed to do? What is a doctor supposed to do when the defendant isn't willing to help herself at all? No further questions.
I'd like to first off start out saying that it has to do with the crime because one, he is on the stand right now arguing against her and calling her a murderer. And that is why it has to do with the crime. My first point. One thing also is, did she tell you that she wanted different meds than her bipolar meds?
She didn't tell me she wanted different meds. She just told me that she was not taking them.
Which implies what? That she wanted different meds, right?
That does not imply that she needs that can be used for many different reasons.
What does it imply then?
What can mean she just doesn't want to take it. She can think it's not needed. She can be just plain straight out lazy. Or like I said, she is bipolar, so she can just make rash decisions and not care.
Well, personally, when I talked to her, she did say that she told you that she wanted different meds.
She never told you that. This is my word versus yours now.
What?
I said she never told me that. This is just now becoming my word versus yours.
Then, about the financial problems. Do you know that she does not have health care?
Yes. She called me telling me that she can no longer afford health care and that she would stop seeing me.
So that is no excuse because she does not have health care. It's proven that she does indeed have financial problems, correct?
Yes.
Which is one thing that he asked you a question, and it seemed contradictory because he made the assumption that that she was just making up that she had financial problems to not go to the doctor. So. Another thing is you only write prescriptions, correct?
Correct.
And so how could you perform a body exam if you are only writing prescriptions?
Because I'm also a doctor. I have a degree in medicine and I can give her physicals. That's what a doctor does.
But if you're only supposed to, as your job, to write prescriptions, then how is it allowed that you're allowed to give a body
That's
exam?
just not my job. I'm a doctor. See, I check my patients for physical exams. I also write prescriptions.
Give her questions.
You may be seated. That will be our last witness of the day. We have come through 5 testimonies. By this point, you guys know how it's going to work. You'll go ahead and get to your spots. Alex and Alex, you guys are both going to be here tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be here tomorrow. You are not. Now, is there a chance that you may return early like she did, or are you going to be gone the whole way through?
Well, my exam's in the morning, so probably
Okay. All right. So, Nate, you can pick somebody to take his spot if you want, or you can just take it all over yourself.